is a delight and an honor to be here. I don't get this opportunity every day, and so it is just a real blessing. And it is pastured poultry, not pasteurized poultry. There is a big difference. And I'm taking this brochure home. My doctor, the doctor look here on me. I want to show this to my wife to show what she really got. I don't know where we missed it, but we missed it out somewhere. So, I get a couple of cracks here. And so I'm going to lay a foundation in this 45 minutes or so, and then I'm going to build on it at the dinner this evening, so I don't recover old ground. So I'm going to lay a foundation here. Let me start with a couple of stories. So I was speaking at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada, Ontario, Canada. And there were three of us at the college there doing a symposium. And so the first guy, I'm in the middle, there's a guy next to me, I'm in the middle, and then there's a lady over here, there's three of us. And we each do a little opening monologue. And this guy, I sat down in the middle of the table, and I noticed this guy had a Bible in front of him. That doesn't happen very often at environmental ecology seminars. And I thought, this will be interesting. I had no idea what he was going to say. What he did, he took his 5-minute opening monologue, and he held this aloft, and he said, I want you students to understand that every abused animal, every gully, every eroded soil, every conquered indigenous people group, every disrespected woman, every exploited child. For 5 minutes, folks, I mean, without notes, he held this aloft and said, every one of those things is because of this book. And I'm sitting there, wow, I got to follow this guy. That is common. That is common. And what it means is that when I come in, I've got to make up some lost time. Okay? I got to make up some lost time. When I wrote the book Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, which is basically it's creation stewardship for the faith community. I called it my coming out book. It was book number 10, and it's one that we didn't publish because I knew that my constituency, we've self-published our other books, but I knew that my constituency generally was not interested in a biblical approach to ecology. And because my sustainable ag, eco-farming, organic farming community generally tends to be, liberal, Democrat, greenie, Gaia, earth muffin, commie pinkos. All right, so I had Faith Words. Faith Words wanted to publish it out of Tennessee. So okay, Faith Words published it, and they have a group around the country. They have 150 pastors who they send manuscripts to for cover endorsements. That's how you look at a book, see who's endorsed this thing. And they sent this to their 150 normal pastors who do endorsements. And if you have the book or you buy the book, it is the only book, and still is, in their entire publication history that they could not get a single endorsement from a pastor on the cover. That's how hot this topic is, folks. That's how hot it is. So for my second time, I'm speaking at UC Berkeley. Yeah, UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley? Okay. And I'm up there, and I've got, a room full of grad students, actually. They were grad students. And I do they wanted to do the virtual tour of the farm. And so I have my slides and I'm going through. And in it, I don't wear this on my sleeve, but I'm very clear about sanctity of life. I'm clear about a young earth, creation, not evolution. And, but I don't wear it on my sleeve, but, you say this several times, and I don't use the word luck. I say blessing, those kinds of things. All right, so I get done with this presentation, and the room erupts in a standing ovation. And I feel pretty good. That's pretty neat, at UC Berkeley. And so we get done. I take some questions. We get done. We go outside. The two professors who invited me, as soon as we get outside, it's dark. We're going for ice cream. I don't know about you, but I'm a discriminatory ice cream eater. I only eat ice cream if I'm alone or with somebody. So they knew that. So they took me out for ice cream after I'm done. And we're out under street lamp. And as soon as we got out on the dark sidewalk, on the street lamp, they whirled around in front of me and stopped me and said, we have a confession to make. Oh, this is interesting. Confession. And they said, we were scared to death for you. I said, really? I said, why? And so here's what they said. They said that during the Vietnam era, if you remember, UC Berkeley is where the original Vietnam student unrest developed. During that time, the students developed a hissing. So when the school brought speakers that they didn't like, or a speaker was saying something they didn't like, they would. This is cordiality. This is how you indicate hospitality, But they would hiss, and basically, now they get up and they physically assault you and send you out. Look what happens to Ben Shapiro when he goes. So anyway, now it's gotten a lot more violent. But back then it was much more sedated. They just hissed. And the two professors said, we've been here for over 20 years. And this is the first time in all of our tenure that we have ever heard a speaker at UC Berkeley use the word God reverently. Now, if you want to swear, that's fine, okay? But if you use it reverently, it said we've never heard a speaker use the word God reverently and not be hissed. Ever. And I thought a lot about that afterwards. And it struck me, and please don't take this wrong, it struck me that perhaps this was the first time in these students' experience that they had met a Christian who was struggling to be consistent about our responsibilities to extend redemption beyond an esoteric Sunday school mental class academic discussion and extend it to our physical world and trying to be consistent. Because what I've learned, and I have spent most of my time, and trust, I'm not consistent, okay? That's why I say don't read more into this, okay? I've got my hypocrisies just like everybody else, okay? But they honored that here was a guy, even though they disagreed vehemently with my conservative biblical approach, they were willing to forgive it because I was willing to ask, should we use styrofoam plates or not? Does it matter how we respect the pigness of the pigs? Does it matter whether we drink Coke or not? Does it matter if we go to Happy Meals? Because what I've learned in this space is, for us as Christians and sanctity of life believers, have you ever met somebody who was a rabid abortionist, but was so aggressive about nobody cutting a tree that they were willing to chain themselves to a tree or join Earth First and sit in front of a bulldozer on a logging site and dare the driver to move, and they're willing to die or plunge into the water to save a baby seal from somebody killing a baby seal to get the little white fur, right? And yet they have no problem ripping a baby out of the womb even 1 minute before birth, okay? And we look at that and say, I don't get it, it doesn't compute. Does everybody nod, or you're with me? And we can't even find the words to try to reconcile that kind of thinking. It's so, I don't understand. Let me tell you something. When we go to a help center fundraiser or a Right to Life march and then stop at Happy Meals on the way home, they view that with the same level of incomprehensible hypocrisy. Or Chick-fil-A. So this is what we're up against. We're up against our integrity. The world is looking for consistency, just like we are. And so when we see these things, when these things happen, we realize just how ubiquitous the problem is. We are friends with the Pregnancy Help Center where we are, and so I called them up and I said, could we donate? They're going to have a fundraiser banquet. So could we donate the chickens for your banquet? Our chickens, we respect our chickens. They actually get bugs and they can scratch and peck and get fresh air and sunlight, and we respect the chickenness of the chicken. And that's part of our life affirmation. And could we donate the chickens to the help center? Well, no, we're getting $3 banquet meals from Tyson's. They wouldn't even take it. We were willing to give it to them, and they wouldn't take them. I was asked many years ago, the Humane Society of the U.S. was putting together a directory of humane farms around the U.S., and we were listed in it, and they wanted me to help write the standards, the credentials of how do we pick a humane farm. And so I'm reading through their proposed, standards, and one of them was about cows. It's inhumane to abort a calf. A lot of times in the industry, maybe you don't know this, in the industry, they abort calves in heifers, in cows, especially in a feedlot situation. So a feedlot doesn't have to worry about a baby calf being born, okay? And of course the cow, the heifer grows better, puts on fat faster if she's not making a calf, right? And so they'll often give them an injection and abort calves to start the feedlot process, so they don't have to worry about calves in the feedlot, and it helps them to grow faster. And in these Humane Society standards, it said, I'm reading along, and it says that it is inhumane to abort a bovine fetus in the third trimester. Humans are 9 months, cows are 9.5, so it's real close, okay? It's a close gestation similarity. So in the third trimester, so this would be after 6 months, okay? Inhumane to abort a calf. Well, I knew who was in the Humane Society. And so I put in the margins, I certainly hope nobody at Humane Society would be interested in aborting a human baby at the third trimester. Of course, they were incensed and never asked me to help do anything with them again. But I'm trying to lay some stories out, help you to understand some of my context, where I've been, the kind of people I'm working with, and my life has been surrounded by this. I mean, I do, interviews with the New York Times, and the first question is, how can you have a compost pile and be a Christian? How can you be interested in the life of a chicken or a cow and be a Christian? Because in the faith community, we have been so big on dominion and control. And when they see the faith community, what they're seeing is conquistadors. Remember what was done in the name of God? And they're seeing crusaders. What was done in the name of God? That's what they're seeing. That's what they think. And so it doesn't matter that I talk to them about Christ. It doesn't matter that I talk to them about salvation. All they can see is this hypocrisy, this hatred of the environment, this hatred of the planet, this hatred of stewardship. On our own farm. On our own farm. We came in 1961 when I was 4, and our farm was in Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Our house was built in 1790. There are things that are old in Virginia. It took a little while for the Oregon Trail to get folks over here, okay? Or Washington, I guess. Okay, I guess there's a rivalry between Oregon and Washington. I don't know. But anyway, it took a while to get here. So there, we were exploiting and began our land rape 100 years before we got here. And so when we came to our farm in 1961, some 3 to 8 feet of topsoil had washed off. There were large areas the size of this room that were bare rock that 500 years ago were 5 feet of soil. And now it's bare rock. There's no soil, nothing. In fact, we had so little soil. Does anybody know what an electric fence stake is? How many of you know what an electric fence stake? It's pretty small, right? We did not have enough soil to hold up electric fence stakes. So Dad went to town and got used car tires and poured and mixed up concrete in the wheelbarrow and put concrete in these used car tires, pushed a 1/2-inch pipe down in it, and my brother and I, we were little kids, but the two of us were strong enough that if he piled these up on the back of the tractor platform and drove real slow across the field, the two of us boys, when he said, okay, another one or whatever, the two of us, we could heave this off. I was about, 7 and he was 10 or whatever. And we could heave these off, and then he'd go along and stick electric fence stakes down in those little 1/2-inch pipes, like a volleyball stanchion. Are you with me? Okay. And that's how we built electric fence. We had gullies. The deepest one we measured was 16 feet deep, a 16-foot deep gully. Okay. In other words, 500 years ago, there was no gully. It was flat, all right, a field, and now it's 16 feet deep. You know how much soil that is? And folks, all of these owners before we came were good Presbyterians and Methodists and Wesleyans and Episcopalians and Lutherans. Are you with me? And they were faithfully putting money in the missionary barrel to help those poor people around the world. And the money was coming from destroying the land. And that's what environmentalists see. That's what they see when they look at us. And I realized that night at UC Berkeley, when that happened, I realized that the faith community, folks, the faith community, my people, your people, the faith community, we have lost the high moral ground. We have lost the spiritual and emotional equity to connect as stewards of God's creation. And we have given that over to creation worshipers instead of us being the repository of stewardship and care of the earth that creates a moral ethical framework for redemptive capacity. We should be the ones that are promoting healing the planet, not the ones laughing at the folks who want to heal the planet. Yeah, those greenies, I mean, and it's to the point where you can't even have a discussion in church. I mean, the average church in America, if you go in and get one of the elders and say, should we maybe not have styrofoam at the potluck? Maybe we should have paper plates. Or better yet, why don't we go to the Salvation Army, get a bunch of mismatched plates, we'll wash them, and there won't be a trash bag to take out after the potluck. My goodness, an elder looked at, what? What are you, some sort of greeny-weeny, earth-muffin, tree-hugging commie pinko? We can't even have the discussion because the faith community bags and stereotypes everything from the tree huggers, and the tree huggers, due to our cavalier and jokes about if somebody mentions maybe we ought to take care of the earthworms. People ask me what I do. I've got this little thing. People ask me, I make earthworms dance. Because I know if earthworms are dancing, everything else is going to be okay. All right? Ultimately, I know that dancing earthworms are actually way more important than whether the Dow Jones Industrial Averages go up or down today. And down deep in our hearts, we all know that too. But the problem is the environmental movement, the earth care movement grew out of an earth worship movement. And so we tend to bag everything that comes from there. It's kind of like if you're a Trump supporter, it doesn't matter what Biden says, you hate it. And if you're a Biden supporter, it doesn't matter what Trump says, even if he speaks the truth, you hate it, right? I mean, that's kind of, because we love boxes. And it was for that reason, years ago, that I tried to deflect some of this stereotypical boxing by taking the moniker, I'm a Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. Because I wanted people to understand, don't box me in, okay? And what we ought to be doing, we ought to be the repository of earth stewardship, not because we worship creation, but because it's God's stuff. It's God's stuff. It's not our stuff. It's God's stuff. John 3:21 is an interesting verse. This is Jesus speaking. He says, he that does truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. But he that does truth. That's an interesting thought. I'd rather catechize truth, have a focus group about truth, write an essay about truth, make a video about truth, I'd make an outline about truth, have a Sunday school curriculum about truth. I'd rather do anything about truth than do truth. Am I right? Man, that's difficult. Don't talk to me about doing truth. Let's just talk about truth. But Jesus puts it right on he says, I want you to do truth. I'm tired of talk. I'm ready to see action. So doing truth, it's Francis Schaeffer, how shall we then live, right? I mean, this is the question. We understand all this, but what does that look like? And the fact is, God is interested in the mundane. We like to think that, He doesn't care about this. I've had arguments with Christians. God doesn't care whether I vaccinate the cows or not. God doesn't care whether I use glyphosate on my soybeans or not. God, that's just it's just preference. He doesn't really care. Well, 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whethersoever therefore you eat or drink, or whatsoever you do, a lot of you know the verse, do most of it to the glory of God. that what it says? What does it say? Do all to the glory of God. Eating, drinking, whatsoever you do. God even knows. Jesus said, I know when a sparrow falls. What's more useless than a sparrow? He says, I know when one falls. What else? He says, I know the number of hairs on your head. I'm making God's life easier every day. But think about that. Do you think that a God who knows if a sparrow falls, a God who knows if one of your hairs falls out, you think that God has an interest in whether I spread glyphosate or not? Whether I make infertile frogs, three-legged salamanders, or a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico and kill all the shrimp and make all the fisheries die? Do you think God cares about something like that? He is interested in the mundane. In fact, it is in the mundane that we create the moral ethical framework where we hang the bigger stuff. If we don't care about the pigness of pigs and the tomatoness of tomatoes, how are we going to care about the Tomness of Tom, the Chrisness of Chris, and the, merriness of Mary? We say we want to affirm our identity as children of God, and that starts by affirming identity of tomatoes of God, pigs of God. This is not sacrilegious. This is simply it's wrapping our academic theology into practice. And that's what the world is desperate to see. They're tired of platitudes of academic focus group. They're tired of systematic theology. They want to see, what does this look like? And we've got to show it to them. That's our mandate. That's our responsibility. The fact is, it's all God's stuff. Psalm 24:1 says, I was going to quote it, and then I said, well, maybe I better make sure I got this right. It's very, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. The earth is the Lord's. Listen, if it were mine, let's say I've got a backpack, and it's my backpack. And the world is God's backpack. I mean, he's big enough to have the world as a backpack. Are everybody with me? Okay, this is not, all right, I'm not trying to demean anything. And this backpack was treated like humanity has treated the earth. And this didn't start in the U.S. Don't think that this is some anti-U.S. thing. Every empire, there's been 25 of them, I think, since recorded history. Every single empire in history has risen and fallen, risen because somebody found soil wealth and hydrologic species and genetic wealth and function, and fallen when they used it up. Everyone. And the U.S. is heading that direction right now. The Ogallala Aquifer is sinking 20 inches a year. It's fallen 100 inches 100 feet in the last 50 years. At that rate, by 2050, all those center pivot irrigations that you fly over and see, when you fly over Kansas and Nebraska and southern Oklahoma, and, won't be any water. There's an old Chinese saying. I know it's unusual to mix Chinese sayings with biblical stuff, but there's a Chinese saying that says, if we keep going the way we're going to end up where we're headed. Okay? And when you see what we have done, wouldn't it be the coolest thing if as the world looks for who's gonna save the aquifer? Who's going to save the soil? Who's going to actually grow food that's so nutrient dense people don't have to go to the hospital because they're eating good food? Who's going to change all these trajectories of problems that we have in the culture? Wouldn't it be cool if the faith community was a shining light and the world said, these people have the answer. Their farms are building soil. Their farms have more pollinators. Their farms don't get dry when the drought comes. Their farms recover faster after a hurricane. Are you with me? Wouldn't it be cool if we were the standard and the world says, let's follow them? We would be that attraction. And guess what? When they come to us for that, we get to say, why do we do this? Well, because we're the hands and feet of God and we're massaging His creation. Creation is not a reluctant stepsister. We have this idea that nature is some sort of a reluctant partner that we've got to, I've got to get you in a half Nelson. I'm going to make you grow apples and I'm going to make you do. No. Our abundant, redemptive Savior has provided a benevolent lover in nature for us to caress in the right places. This is not a place to be violent to. It's a place to embrace. And so for me, I've come to the point where I realize that creation is an object lesson of spiritual truth. As I've wrestled with all this that I've talked about here, I've come to the conclusion, why is there creation? Why is all this here? Why are there the trees? Why is there soil? Why is there rivers? Why? Well, because God needs a parable. He needs a practical framework. He can't talk to us about divine things unless he has, we live in the universe of physical. So when he talks about forgiveness, well, he needs us to be able to see forgiveness. So I make no bones about it. I want to see when people drive out of our farm, I want people to sit in the car and their families, and I want them to say, oh, wow, we've just seen forgiveness. Oh, so that's what abundance looks like. That's what redemption looks like. And in my short life, I'm very young. In my short life, we've been on the farm now since 1961. I was 4, so we're looking at 62, I think, if I'm doing the math right, years, okay? I have watched, folks, these gullies fill in. Not completely, okay? But they've got trees in them. They're growing soil. I've watched these big areas the size of this room that we used to put the concrete tires in and the electric fence stakes. Guess what? There's 12 inches of soil. We don't use concrete tires anymore. And the fields that I walked in as a child and could walk the entire farm, and the vegetation was so dense, I could walk the entire farm and never set foot on a piece of vegetation. There was that much bare ground. Now it's lush and full. And when I was about 13 or 14 is when a farm kid, the first equipment that a farm kid is allowed to drive is the hay rake, right? Mower is a little bit touchy. Baler is really touchy. But the rake, get on there, son, and just make circles, okay? And so you can do the rake. And I can remember very well, 13 or 14, when I started raking, having to put, and some of you will know what I'm talking about, 16 swaths together to get one little anemic windrow. I mean, then when I started mowing, I'd have to look down the field because I'd lose my place. It was so thin, I couldn't see where I'd mowed. And today, one windrow, one swath is about 10 feet of the rake. One swath makes a windrow too big to jump over. That's not bragging, folks. That is paying humble homage to a creation that is magnificently and infinitely designed, where God woos me to participate as hands and feet to extend his redemptive capacity in a tangible way into the earth so that visitors can leave saying, wow, that is God. And suddenly you have a credible platform to touch people about the spiritual aspects, because like Jesus' teaching in parables, they saw it physically. And so, does God care? I have found that to be probably the most powerful question. In fact, it even worked on the Chick-fil-A folks. I had the executives from Chick-fil-A, they flew up their jet and they came up. Well, actually, it was after. What got them there was they had a mid-level gal in the Chick-fil-A organization who was a fan, and she worked on the upper-level guys. And I was speaking at a conference in Atlanta. That's where their headquarters are. I was coming, and she contacted me. She said, if I could get the VEEPs, the head, the Dan Cathy direct reports in Chick-fil-A to come and meet with you, would you be willing to meet with us since you're going to be in Atlanta? I said, absolutely, sure, I'd be glad to. So she, connived. And these three direct, so these are the, you got Dan Cathy, the founder, owner, and then you've got their VEEPs. So three of them, direct reports, came and to dinner, reluctantly, but they like this young up-and-comer, mid-level, gal that was in the organization, so they're going to placate her, and they come. And they were not happy to be there. And, I can schmooze and be diplomatic, and we did small talk and different things, and we started getting into different discussion, different things, and they're all good. They're good people, good guys, and I just asked them, does God care? Does God care what kind of chickens you serve? Does God care what kind of chickens I eat? The water broke. It was like a dam bursting. From that moment on, they were totally in. Because you cannot, as a believer, you cannot look at anything in life and say, God doesn't care about that. Now, I'm not trying to be a cultist and say if you have a Snickers bar, you've just sinned, okay? I like one once, a couple times a year too, okay? So I'm not trying to turn this into a cult, okay? But while maybe a couple Snickers bar a year isn't sin, probably 3 a day is. Are you with me? Okay? And so when I asked, does God care? Suddenly the dam broke and the discussion went a totally wonderful direction. And the next thing I knew, they were up visiting with us, asking, how can we do this? And they worked on it for a year. I gave them a roadmap, but they ended up not doing it because the sticking point, and they're not the first one that's done it, so I'm not singling out Chick-fil-A, okay? Well, if we offer two choices, what do we call the other? Factory farm chicken? My favorite is fecal chicken. What do we call it? And after working on it for a year, they just decide, it's just too hard. It's too hard. So does God care? That's a big one. And probably the one that keeps coming back to me and is so profound that it's almost unspeakable. And if there are hyper Calvinists here, I apologize. You won't like this. Psalm 78:41, going through all the problems that the Israelites had. And it says, yes, they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel. and limited the Holy One of Israel. You know what? I don't want to limit God. I think God has designs on a lot of things in life that maybe I haven't thought about. I don't want to be the one that limits him. That's a profound idea. So my question is, how can I help heal? And of course, we have the answer in 2 Chronicles 7:14, but it's a very visceral, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves, pray and seek my face. What does that mean? That means we are seeking God for these mundane things in life. Does God care? Yes. Does he care about little things? Yes. And how can I, as his representative, as his steward here, how can I represent his healing in my community, in my world, in my family, in my home, so that my legacy is leaving not only a greater awareness of spiritual responsibilities, but a greater understanding that God has provided it all, he cares about it all, and I'm completely dependent on him and the physical and everything else. It is all pulsating with divine sentience, and I get to participate, and that's an honor. I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now except exit. And